Hello and welcome back to CarMiZa. This is Trunk Details Part 15, and guess who got a tripod? Thanks again, Joe, for the suggestion of being able to see me doing work on the car. To do that, I picked up a tripod and a remote, and now I'll be doing a bit more of this where you guys will see me. So if you've never seen me before, you're following on the channel, hello, good to meet you. Hopefully someday we can meet in person. In this video, we're going to go over some additional work in the trunk, trimming out the panels. If you watched the last video, video 14, kind of started the ski wall and also finished off the main plate and then the little side plates that I built for that. So let's go ahead and get started. If you've been following along in the last trunk details video, I made this template, this little mock-up cardboard piece of the rear ski wall, and I've now transferred this to the aluminum. So I purchased, again, the way I do it is I purchase the aluminum cut to size. On this piece, if you notice, this is actually the top. On the template, I ended up having to round these corners like by 1/4 of an inch, just a little tiny bit. Turns out it was just a matter of tweaking the bolts that are holding in the main plate. Now I don't have to cut this at all. It's perfectly straight, and it mounts up flush and tight to the main plate in the car, especially when I bolt everything together. So now what I'm going to do is cut this. To get that radius, I just used a socket that basically looked like a good radius to me to lay it out. I'm not going to cut this with a router. I will cut it with a jigsaw. I may later. This is the area that goes in at the bottom. I might put a V in this and I might square off these corners, but I'm not going to worry about that until right before I'm ready to upholster. So the first thing is to get this in, get it cut, get it in, get it mounted in the car. So next thing I'll do is get it cut. A couple of other quick things I want to show just before I cut this. If you notice, I laid it out. I drilled 4 holes in the corners. This is going to minimize the curving that I need to do. Because again, cutting 1/8 aluminum with a jigsaw, you got to be really careful, and it does not like tight bends. Again, I'll be using WD-40. I would like a headlamp to get some really good light on it. And I wear gloves when doing this just because you feel a little bit more in control. And also I'm doing it on this little work table I've got. And if you notice, there's a hole here for a router. And this is going to allow for good support on either end. If I hung this over the edge of this table, this piece is going to flop all over. So just a little bit of setup, and now let's go ahead and get this cut. Okay, one other quick thing to mention too. When I spray WD-40, I like to put it on the blade and not directly on the line I'm going to cut, because with the Sharpie I'm using, it'll a lot of times the WD-40 just kind of takes the Sharpie line away. So let me go ahead and get started on the cut. This again is the speed I'm going at, very, very slow. That gives you an idea about how fast it goes. It's going to take a while, but we'll get it cut. Okay, progress on this piece. So I did my rough cut all the way around. I came in with a file. Again, no shame in that. Cleaned up this edge and this edge. If you notice, I just kind of chunked out the corners. I'll clean those up. Notice too, this piece I haven't cleaned up yet, and it's got a little tiny bit of a wave in it. But when let's see if I can capture this. And this is what I'm doing, basically putting a square up to this edge. And you can see that's nice and square, nice and straight. And then I'll do that for all 4 sides. When I'm done, by the way, the socket, it was very intentional. It's the same diameter as the radius of this file. And then I'll be able to clean up the corners and then get the whole thing done. But cutting this hole alone is probably cutting it, cleaning it up the file, checking it with a square, rechecking it, so on and so forth, is probably 1.5 hours to 2 hours to cut one hole. And again, in hindsight, I could have cut it with a router, used a jig, and hit it with a flush trim bit. But I haven't done anything this thick with a router, and maybe if someone in the comments wants to let me know if they've done it,
It's a little bit sketchy and it's super messy. There's, oh my gosh, if you watch my other videos, I did some other machining of thinner aluminum with the router, and it cuts great. It's a razor straight edge, but it's just a huge mess. So it'll probably take me an hour to clean that up. So I'm good with this, and I'll keep going, and I'll update you in just a moment. For those of you who have been following me, you know that I'm pretty particular. And again, I constantly say I'm not going to go past the current step until, it's as good as I can get it. So I'm going to router this perimeter. It's a freakish thing to do because, again, I'm getting it super close with the file, but I can get it better with the router, even though it's going to have carpet that's 3/16 of an inch thick over the top of it. I would have had to cut the perimeter out anyway before routering, so I didn't really waste a lot of time. And I decided to grow a set and router some 1/8 inch aluminum. So here's what I've done. I cut strips of MDF. By the way, I try to be as clever as possible wherever possible. My wife ordered these big picture frames, and the packing inside of them had these long MDF strips. And I'm like, don't throw those out, I'll use those. So I saved them, and I was able to repurpose them. I didn't have to rip them or anything like that. I just cut them to length. This the width. So again, perfect utilization of something I would have otherwise thrown away. So what I've done here is these pieces are square to the aluminum. And then if you notice here, if I take the square, perfectly square there as well. So this hole will end up being perfectly square itself, 4 corners, and then square to the aluminum. So now what I'll do, if you notice again, I've got this, it's kind of tough to see with the lighting, right up to the edge. And I'm not really taking any additional meat out of the piece. And it's not super critical. If you look in the car, it's just a big dynamitted hole. So, even if I do take a 30-second more off, it's no big deal. So now at this point, I've got this double side taped, really good and tight. And I'll get the router set up, and we'll go ahead and get it routed. Couple of quick things before we fire up the router. I am outside to try to minimize the mess and keep it out of the garage. The good news is I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and it's December 6th. Welcome to Arizona. I think it's about 70 degrees out right now, and it's, 8:30 at night. When I cut this, obviously the diameter of this, the radius is going to be the corner, which is smaller than what I had originally. That is totally fine. I'm likely going to end up squaring these off, but for now I'm going to round them just for carpeting purposes. Also, for anybody that's been following me and watching the videos, I talked at one point about which direction to push the work when you're using a router table. You always want to push into the blade. So I've got these arrows here, even though I've done this a million times, just always check. And think of it as the blade is going this way, right? And you always want the blade to cut into the work. And so you want to push the work accordingly. So just be careful there. When you're doing it on an inside like this, it's the opposite of when you would do a standalone piece, because you're pushing it from right to left on a standalone piece. So, all right, give me just a sec here and I'll get the router fired up and I'll show that part and we'll get this thing routed. Okay, fire in the hole. And my switch. Going a little slower in the corner. Okay, let's do it. Let's take a look. All right, it took me about 20 seconds to cut it. It'll be about an hour to clean up. Once again, don't mind my gross bench. Let me show you how nice that edge is. It's literally a machined edge at that point. Look at the corner. Again, that radius is fine for me. That is a beautiful cut. If we look at it from the back side, again, looking at its focus here, you can see that really nice clean edge. And that's, admittedly, that's better than I could ever have gotten it with a file. This is properly precise. So the next step is to get it fitted into the car and then start getting it mounted. So we'll work on that next. Okay, I'm all cleaned up in the garage and outside. It wasn't that bad. It was a little bit of vacuuming and it was good. So again, guys, I can't get over, I'm so impressed with how well this comes out, machining the aluminum with the router. It's just such a really nice cut. I may have to even just knock down this with like some 320 because it's so sharp. It's such a precise cut. And also, just to clarify, I don't need to do anything in terms of fitting the plate into the car. It fits perfectly. I just need to figure out how I'm going to mount it. I know I'm going to do the same thing I did with the main plate, where I'll, kind of, as you saw up there, countersink bolts through. That'll go into the rear seat. What I'm trying to figure out is how I'm going to develop a pattern there, because I want to catch the right areas. If you notice, it's almost like corrugated, and there's the rear seat sitting there. There's some big kind of hollow pockets. Obviously, I want to make sure the bolts have absolutely no chance of, you sit in the back seat and you can feel a bolt hitting your back. So I need to be cognizant of that and careful. So I'll go ahead and get that laid out and get everything figured out here. We'll start getting it screwed in. Okay, the first step was to just clamp it into place. And again, now I'll go through and figure out screwing it to the metal of the rear seat. Notice too how nice the fit is there. Again, this piece was pre-cut by the company I buy the metal from, and it's just square. So that's a really good indication that this whole setup that I'm building is square. It's going to look pretty cool with those integrated side panels. And if you have been following along, I'm going to be building covers for the wheel wells and then covers for the side panels. So I'll kind of get this whole thing all set up. So again, I'm going to keep plugging away and planning out these the way I'm going to set up these screw holes. All right, it's a few days later. I had to get some stuff done around the house, and here's what I've got. I've laid out the screw holes. You can see the markings there. And I'll go out and use my punch, and I will pre-drill these, and then I'll put it in the car and drill these through. These were pretty tricky to lay out because I needed to make sure that they're going to hit some of the shallow areas in that kind of wavy metal in the back seat. So what I did is I put it in, I clamped it, or prior to that, I kind of roughed it out, put it in the car, and then put my marks, and I stuck my head through, and I put one finger here, and I could see through this hole, and kind of put my finger on the other side, figured out where it lined up just to confirm. So fingers crossed, hopefully all of this lines up well. Notice there's not nearly as many screws. There's still a bunch, but I'm going to put 2 more here, but I'm going to place those once I get this in the car. Not as many screws as were on the main plate, but the main plate is, got a lot of weight on it, and it's hanging straight down. So this is just decorative. So, all right, I'll go ahead and get this drilled and get it mounted in the car. Okay, so I had it in the car, had it clamped in place, drilled through all the holes that I drilled here, and then countersunk them all. So, moment of truth, now I try to mount it in the car, fingers crossed. Let's hope it all fits all right. What do they say at Staples? That was easy. Not quite. In the end, it came out good. If you notice on the top, where just above the ski hole, there's 3 screws. I ended up hitting a kind of a soft spot in the center. I had just the center screw in and then added the other 2 screws. There was, underneath the dynamat, there wasn't as much metal as I could catch with the washer, so I ended up adding the other screws. I will have to tweak the torque
of the screws, because as you can notice, I think the edge looks good. And again, it's going to be carpeted over. I keep going crazy on this stuff. But the final torquing and pulling of the screws kind of dictates keeping this thing nice and straight. It's very good. I mean, it's excellent. You're not even going to really see that because the Sony stuff gets in the way there. So, all right. So ski hole plate for now, I would say, is done. Now it's time to turn my attention to what I'm calling the shock tower covers. These are going to be a separate piece that go right here. And then what I'm calling the main side panels are going to be over here. Two different pieces because it's going to be a bear to try to upholster these, the whole thing as if it was one. Also, one of my big criteria here with these sides is to try to not square off the trunk. Like, all due respect to anybody that's watching this that's squared off a trunk, it's pretty easy to just run a straight, square it off and make it a box and then waste a bunch of space. I think it looks a lot more dramatic, and in this case kind of elegant, to have it as open as possible. And it's a lot more challenging to make it look right in the end. So the shock tower area, I'm going to have to do quite a bit of mock-up and design. I'm not going to waste y'all's time going through that. But as you can see, it's going to go against this piece flat. It's going to round here and then go straight up against this panel. I think I'm going to make the entire thing out of aluminum. It's going to be a little bit tricky and, again, totally overkill. But let's see how the mock-up goes. All right, I am several hours into thinking about this design, laying things out. I went back through all of my criteria for these side panels. I want them to be symmetrical, tight to the car. What I'm calling sexy. The way the lighting is going to be set up in the trunk is it's going to shine from this back wall and hit everything there. And I want there to be curvature here, which is going to provide shadows to make the lighting more dramatic, not just lighting throughout. And that's going to be really important. So I didn't want to just, run this panel all the way over and box it off and all of that. I wanted to have the trunk as wide and as open as possible. That's going to really kind of accentuate the centerpiece being the millbirds and the display tube and all of that. So here's kind of where I'm at so far. I've got a mock-up piece there. This foam I use, I just hot glued a couple of block pieces of wood in there just to shim this out. If you notice right now, you don't see the bracket that holds the strut for the trunk lid. That's why I'm shimming this out, because if I do this design, which I'll likely do, I'll cut an oval hole where just the actual gas strut will come through. So you won't see, you notice on this side, you see all the brackets and all that. It'll kind of be buried in there. So that's what I'm working on. The next thing I need to figure out is how I'm going to do the curve. I can do it out of bending aluminum, flat bar aluminum, and kind of building like a big grid, or I can do it out of plywood in fleece and then fiberglass it. So I'm going to keep designing and let's see how this goes. Okay, I'm not quite to the finish line, but I'm getting closer. I am done playing with cardboard. All right, now you can kind of see my vision. So let's take a look at what we've got. I mocked this up. This is going to be all aluminum. This will be a piece of just 1/8 inch plate aluminum. Same with that triangular piece right there. And then this will just be a 1 inch flat bar. And then I'll put a piece, like a strap, if you will, behind it on either side. And then I'm going to do a plywood base so that when this pushes into that corner, it's tight up against there. So that's basically it. You can notice there too, I don't know if you can see that, but I numbered each of these, and then I'll transfer that to, the actual final material. But I think that'll look pretty cool. Once again though, when everything's in there, you're not going to see a ton of this, but that's kind of the look I was after. Something different. Again, anybody can just run vertical walls and box off the trunk. I wanted something a little bit cooler. I will still have to, in this piece, cut holes, and then the strut for the gas strut for the trunk lid will go in there. But that also will be a lot more finished off. You're still going to be able to see all of this detail. And then obviously I still have to do these side panels. But the next thing is to start getting this stuff cut, figure out my order of operations, and get those into the car. So I'm going to continue on with this. All right, I have pulled out the mock-up template. One thing I didn't mention just a moment ago is, as you can see, I have one of the Zapco links at each end. This basically represents the very ends of the one Zapco. And if you notice, I had to kind of notch out this piece I'm building, and I'm going to build kind of like a pocket for the amplifier to sit in. It's very minor, it's very small. Now what I've done is I took all the pieces out. Notice I taped them together. So now it kind of gives me, this is my pattern for both sides. Unfortunately, thank you BMW, there is slight irregularities between the two sides of the car. The car is not perfectly symmetrical, but what my goal is to make the trunk symmetrical when I'm done. So now what I'm gonna do, I've kind of given it some thought, kind of my order of operations I got all my notes over there on my computer. What I'm gonna do is start out taking the 4 pieces that I'll use just out of plate aluminum. So this 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna make these out of 1/4-inch MDF, test fit them in the car, make sure everything is good, and then I'll rough cut 1/8-inch aluminum. I'll double side tape the aluminum to the pieces of the 1/4-inch MDF, and then I'll router the aluminum and get those to be, a really nice replica of the MDF. So let me work on that. We'll go ahead and get that going. All right, it's a few days later and I've got a solid plan set up. So first thing I'm gonna do is take what I'm calling the end plates for the curve piece you just saw that go up against the ski wall and then that go up against where the shock towers are. And I'm going to basically cut these out of MDF. Then I will transfer, I'll just use these as a template and then flush trim the aluminum. One thing here too, on this angle, I could go in and set up my table saw on that angle, but again, I'm using my Fisher-Price / Harbor Freight rig. So what I'm gonna do is just run it with a jigsaw. I'll cut it a little bit fat, and then I'll double side tape a piece of MDF stock to it, and then just run it across the flush trim bit, and that'll give me a nice perfect edge. So let's go ahead and get these cut. All right, these pieces are rough cut. So what I did also, this corner, if you notice, I've got the indicator for this being square. So I check that, same thing down here. So these edges are final, if you will. And then as you can see, my jigsaw cut, it's not perfect, doesn't have to be, because I'm gonna router that. Now I also have, on this side, you can see this and this edge, and up here. This is factory, this is square as well. I'll use this little disc sander to clean up these straight edges, and then in just a moment I'll grab the drill press with a drum sander and I'll get this curve. And then the only things I've got to do is router, and then these pieces will be all set. So let's continue on. All right, let's get a little footage of me sanding these. What I'll do too is grab a straight edge and make sure that this is perfectly straight, but as you can see, I don't know if you can see that pencil line there. It's really, really close, if not dead on. All right, I'll continue on with the rest of the straight edges. All right. Again, I don't know if you can see that, but no gap, nice and straight. And keep in mind too, this is gonna go up against the Dynamat in the car, which is definitely not perfectly straight. But all right, I'll continue on and get all the rest of these set. Okay, with the straight pieces done, these edges here, everything is good there. And now I needed a solution to be able to get a better cut on this. And again, it's going right up against Dynamat. It's not straight at all in the car. It's intentionally kind of wobbly because of the line of the car. But what I'm going to do is set up a kind of a drum sander wannabe kit here with the drill press and be able to sand these edges. So let's give it a shot. right, I'll keep at this and check back when I'm done. All right, as you can see here, I'm right up to my pencil line. Everything looks good there, but what I will do, the true test is going to be to kind of dry fit it into the car. So I'll go ahead and do that, make sure everything goes good, and I'll get the other side set as well. Okay, these pieces are, there's just some double-sided tape holding them in the car. Notice the gap along the top. That is intentional because there's going to be carpet on the main plate and on this piece, sorry, and then this will be carpeted and butt up against it. And I'm going to trim the edge of this flush. As I'm building this whole thing out, again, I'm planning where I'm going to roll carpet, where I'll have it flush, and that makes a difference in the gaps. So that piece is just sitting there. I got the other piece in as well. Again, not perfect in terms of placement, just wanted to make sure the fabrication of these pieces is good. The other two things that I need to be really careful of, let me grab it here. I got this little teeny tiny level. And I'm using this, or when I get these placed in the car for this mock-up, it's critical that the edge, this edge here, is vertical, right? And the same is true going that way, because when I wrap these pieces around, I'm going to be using flat bar pieces of aluminum, and if this piece is not straight, it's not going to line up and there'll be a weird gap. So something I need to plan as well. All right, the next thing here I need to do is just router the edges of this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and get this set up and I'll flush trim those next. Okay, getting ready to router this edge, and I wanted to show, I've never shown this in any of my videos. This is the tape that I use. I suggest if you're going to be routering like this or doing any kind of fabrication work where you need to attach two pieces, this is just a 1-inch woodworking double-sided tape. It's really thin. You can get it on Amazon. I think it's, I don't know, 10 or 12 bucks for a 50-foot roll, I think. I go with a 1-inch, and I just use, you know, probably 3 little pieces here to attach this. So in the years ago, I used something that was thicker and it would be a little bit less accurate. So I prefer this thin stuff. I will actually post a link in this video for this tape if you're interested. Alrighty, so now I have a straight edge against my jigsaw cut on the angle. And once again, this edge that I cut is not perfect. I can feel it rough on my finger. It's totally fine. This piece is perfectly straight. And again, I'll use a flush trim bit. I'll router this, and that's going to give me a perfect edge on my piece. So let's go ahead and do that. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's going to give you a nice, perfect edge there. And again, even if there are flaws in this piece, it'll transfer to this piece. So, all right, let's pull this apart. Here's another little tip if you're going to be using this double-sided tape and routering. I see where a lot of people use like a flathead screwdriver and put it in there and pull the pieces apart because they're stuck on really good. That can mar your template, especially the edge. So you can see how nice and straight that is now. So I prefer a putty knife. I put it in there and I just kind of move it back and forth. That way it doesn't ding up this piece, which then, again, this is going to be my template for the aluminum. Okay, there's those two pieces in the car. Again, these are just templates that I'll use to cut the aluminum. In case you're wondering too, I want to try to share with you guys how much time things take me. So to cut the 4 pieces, the 2 you see and the other 2 that go up in those corners, 1 hour and 40 minutes. So if I was a shop, this is, you know, there's faster ways to do things from a, you know, a cost to manufacture kind of perspective. But obviously this build is kind of a labor of love. I'm not, you know, worried about cutting corners to save time or whatever. I'm not doing things in bulk or whatever. But look at that fit. Beautiful. You can see the gap at the top again for the carpet. Very nice, very solid. If you've been following this build, you know that I am frugal. I don't like to waste things, and I'm also very nostalgic. So check this out.
This piece of aluminum is the original piece that was in the car when I purchased the car, that was hanging from the rear deck, what I'm calling kind of my main plate. I was not able to reuse this because it was too small, and obviously the holes are in the wrong places. But I'm going to repurpose the aluminum. I'm also getting a little sick of spending a lot of money on aluminum. I'm probably, I don't know, several $100s in aluminum in the trunk. So what I'm going to do, if you notice I've laid these pieces out, I've got to be strategic here because there's a whole bunch of holes from where this was mounted, wiring and all of that. So I'm finding areas where I can use this without any holes. It's also a little bit scratched up and all that. When I rough cut these, I'll go ahead and hit those with a disc sander like I did on some of the other pieces like the Sony brackets that I built, which kind of cleans up the whole edge. So all right, so the next step here, basically I'll trace these out, I'll rough cut with a jigsaw, and then I'll double side tape the aluminum pieces to the MDF. We'll go ahead and get that routed. All right, got my pieces laid out, ready to rough cut.
All right, just in case you're new to the channel and you have not seen me cut aluminum before, this is 1/8 inch aluminums, which is pretty thick, and I've got a special metal cutting blade, aluminum cutting blade on a jigsaw, just a cheap jigsaw here, and I run at a really slow speed, and I also spray some WD-40 on the blade itself just to help. So let me give you an idea of the speed I go at and just get a little cut here. Not super fast, but again, I just wanted to show the speed. So I'll go ahead and get all 4 of these pieces rough cut.
All right, everything is rough cut. That took a while because the aluminum that was in the car had glue on it, double-sided tape, hot glue, upholstery glue, all kinds of stuff in it. It was a mess. So I hit it with a sander. And after I sand it, for some reason, the aluminum is really easy to get fingerprints in. I don't really care about that because it's going to be carpeted. If anything, I'll probably rough up the aluminum more than it is right now for the glue to adhere when I go to carpet it. So, all right, so at this point, again, all the aluminum is rough cut. Now I will double side tape the MDF to the respective aluminum piece and hit it with the flush trim bit on the router. Okay, at this point I've got all my templates attached to the aluminum, double side taped, and now I'll use the router to go ahead and flush trim these. This again makes a massive mess doing the aluminum, and I'm doing it outside, but fortunately it is warm. It's probably, I think, 80 degrees today, and I'm in Arizona wearing shorts, t-shirt, so fortunately I'm able to do this outside. So let's go ahead and get it routed. Okay, that's one piece, and you can see the edge there. I don't know if you can see if it's pulling up on camera, but it's a really nice kind of a machined edge. So now I'll just go through, and I'll do the rest of the pieces. All right, the good news, everything came out great. Look at the edge you get on this. This is just so cool. Routering aluminum is just the coolest thing ever. So that's the good news. Bad news, look at the mess. This stuff is crazy. So I'll get out here with the shop vac and get this vacuumed up, and from here move on to the next part of this these panels.
All right, just want to show this real quick. These are just setting in there. But once again, this is why I go through all the trouble. And again, I get it. It's all going to be covered up by carpet, but I want it to be accurate. I want it to be as good as I can possibly get it, which is why I put myself through all the time and the mess in the driveway and all that. So, all right, continuing on.
Maintaining the theme of complete overkill, here's what I'm going to be doing for this next part. So these, obviously you can see the M pieces, P2, P3. This is going to be just 1 inch flat bar, and then this will be 1 inch flat bar, but these will be the straps. I needed to figure out the curve to get the radius, which I have already done. I basically did this by hand, but then measured it to make sure it was, you know, basically a right angle here and a perfect curve. Did that, and then I've transferred this to a piece of scrap wood, so I'll cut this, and then this will serve as a jig for me to bend these pieces out of the 1 inch. So let's see how this goes. Jig complete, and this will make more sense in just a bit. All right, I have successfully routered aluminum, 1/8 inch aluminum. Now I'm going to attempt to cut flat bar 1/8 inch by 1 inch in a chop saw. Thank you, Joe Schmo, for the advice, and I've never done this before, and we're gonna film this live, so hopefully this goes well. Notice I've got it vertical as opposed to laying horizontal. I think the big issue is making sure it doesn't flap around, so I've got 2 vices holding it, or 2 clamps holding it to the actual table. So let's go ahead and give it a shot. Like butter. That was awesome. All right, more to come. All right, I'm going to do this one side at a time. And again, this is another example of where I've got kind of the overall design, but the details I'm still kind of working through as I go. One other thing too, with regard to the chop saw, in all seriousness, I had never done that before, and I've been fabricating stuff my whole life. My point there is that if you're chasing something that's, you know, a crazy goal and it's going to be difficult and you want to do the best you can, don't be afraid to step outside your comfort area and just be safe, obviously. And the results are really rewarding when they come out good. Okay, so this you know, cutting this flat bar on that saw is going to give you a nice square cut. So I clean it up with a file. But all right, so here's what we've got. I measured the same distance here. I think these are approximately where these are going to go. I think what I'm going to do is pre-drill these, and then there's going to be hardware, of course, stainless steel hardware that goes in there. I'm not going to do anything yet on the bottom because I'm either going to do another metal cleat or I might do like a piece of wood, plywood. Still kind of working through that, and I'll let you know when I get there. So at this point, I think it makes sense to pre-drill these and then get it set up to be able to do the curve. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, here's what I ended up with. I used some MAP gas and a C-clamp. And maybe I'll film the next one as I do it, but it's kind of a pain. And it came out good, basically going up against this edge. I'm going to tweak this a little bit more, but that's basically the concept. And then this is going to be a little bit longer because I'm not exactly sure where it's going to meet up with this. But the next thing I'll do is attach this to this just with some double side tape. And you can see it looks pretty square, but I'll check it obviously. And then get it in the car and make sure that's going to meet the right curve. All right, let me show you what I got here. See if I can do this in front of the camera.
kind of tough to see there, but it is nice and square. So that's basically what I need to be able to make sure this thing is, whoop, poked myself in the face, it's square. So right now it's just double side taped. I did have to cut a little chunk out of the back because I want to have plenty of meat for, I want to put 2 screws in here. So not quite sure if I'm going to do the neck strap now or what I'm going to do. So let me get that figured out and I'll be right with you. I know what I'm doing next. And if you've been following along watching, I've been watching this and seeing this as I've been going, but wasn't sure exactly when it was going to become something I wanted to fix. You notice we've got the curve on the zebra wood. Oh, and by the way, obviously this is just the template, but I have received the zebra wood. There'll be a new video. Not sure which one's going to come out first, either this one or the zebra wood reveal, but that is the zebra wood. It is back and we'll be going in the car here shortly for a fit. So if you notice with this curve, obviously the aluminum is straight and I wanted to be able to make sure it went all the way to the top. And so I've got a little tiny bit that's touching here. What I'm going to do is notch this very carefully. Actually, I just figured out as I'm talking here, I figured out what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut a slice and then I'm going to, like right where it meets the wood, and I'm going to bend the bottom part just slightly so that this piece sits up flush against here, but obviously I've got room for the carpet. Once again, one of those are little secret things. Nobody will see it, but it'll make sure that that's not standing off, because now this isn't really technically square up there, right? So we want to make sure it is. All right, let me deal with that. Okay, I just cut a relief cut and then took a crescent wrench and then used that to kind of bend it. And that's what the bend looks like. Let's go see it in the car. All right, there we go. Nice tighter fit. And once again, I keep saying this, but this is all the aluminum is going to be carpeted with a carpet that's, when compressed, is at least 1/8 of an inch thick, just shy of 3/16. So, but I figure if I get this accurate now, when it's carpeted, it's really going to look good. So, all right, let's continue on with the next part. All right, working on curving the next piece. It's definitely tricky to try to maintain the same curve and have it be, you know, square, but coming out pretty good. So keep at it. All right, gonna show you how I'm bending these pieces. This is not precise to begin with. So this basically just gets me in the ballpark. Then I've got my jig, and then I just do a bunch of hand tweaking. And I'll show you how I line it up with the other pieces just to make sure that, in this case, all 3 of these cleats are gonna be basically the same bend. So, start out with some map gas. Get it good and hot. Both sides, come at it from the back as well. Now, and I'm watching it, I can see where the bend is. And I take this jig. Again, this is just it's totally a work in progress the way I do this. Probably definitely a better way. And if you guys were watching when I did the jig that I made for the capacitors, those brackets, that might have been a little bit better way to do this, but again, I just basically keep working it. You'll see by the time I'm through with it, it does come out quite good. Also got to be cognizant of twisting it, because that'll make a difference on how the pieces lie. But if you can see,
this area right here, already that's in better shape. And then I'll reapply heat as needed. I know I need more bend right in here, so I'll bring it down. Apply more bend there, so on and so forth. So, all right, let me get a little bit further and I'll show you how it goes. All right, I think I got a little stage fright there. That's the piece I did. The bend didn't come out very good and I ended up cutting it too short. So I did another one. And again, right now I'm just lining it up here to this one as a reference to make sure the curve looks good, which it does. All right, here is the progress with the piece sitting in the car. So what I've done also is the triangular piece. You can see the line up there. I made sure that was level, which is going to ensure hopefully that everything remains square as I go. And I think the next thing I want to do is just start placing the flat bar in and kind of cutting it as I go, and see how everything goes. I want to keep it all lined up and straight and make sure that end cap in this corner fits really good. So, all right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this video. And before I do, there's a couple of quick things I want to mention too. You guys likely see all the time that I'm putting into this. This one piece, I'll add up the hours. I mean, it's Monday morning right now. Yesterday, I spent 10 hours out here working on that piece, and I basically did the MDF templates and got to this point with this piece, and it was 10 hours of work. So you may look at this and say, man, this guy's crazy. But one of the things I think it's important that I don't do is I don't have to redo a lot of things. And when I finish something, I'm really happy with it. And again, my whole philosophy is I get it as far as I can get it, or I get it as good as I can get it so that I don't have to redo it. So, all right, so with that, I'm gonna leave this one as a cliffhanger. Again, be on the lookout for the video with the zebra wood reveal. That'll be coming up here soon as well. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe and tell your friends. Talk to you soon. Take care.